All right. Hello, class. Welcome. Welcome again, class, to philosophy virtual lectures. Uh, this time we'll be talking about chapter 9 of the textbook, which is Rene Descartes. Uh, Descartes, that's the way you pronounce it, not Descartes. I used to pronounce it that way. But it's Descartes, Doubt and Certainty. Um, Descartes is usually giving this the category of being the starting point of modern philosophy. So now we're going from the ancient, right, from ancient medieval to modern philosophy now. So modern philosophy begins, right? You could say overall, the overall trend, right? The zeitgeist, the spirit of modern philosophy is just the rejection of traditions. Uh, Whereas, think about last lecture or the readings, trying to keep up. Whereas the medieval philosophers, these philosopher clerics, these theologians like Thomas Aquinas, Saint Anselm, and then before these people, Saint Augustine, they took great pains to reconcile and synthesize, right, the ancient Greek philosophers, right, Plato with Augustine, Plato and Aristotle with both Anselm and Aquinas, specifically Aristotle with Aquinas. They went to great pains to reconcile those ancient traditions, those Greek philosophies, with their own contemporary beliefs. In the modern philosophy period, beginning specifically with, I guess you could say, Descartes, arguably with Descartes, uh, we're not going to rely on these ancient Greek traditions. We're just going to discard them. In fact, we're going to argue that these ancient Greek traditions are prone to error. They're not rational. Okay? So now we're focusing now on the name of the game is rationality, reason, and this is an effect of this turn towards rationality as an effect of the scientific revolution. The scientific revolution, you might recall from your elementary or even your 1301 history courses, the scientific revolution begins with these scientists, I guess you could say, right? Galileo, Copernicus. Right? Well, I guess I go backwards. First, it was like Kepler, and then Copernicus, and then finally Galileo, who basically upturned the the worldview that we have a geocentric uh, universe, cosmos, that the Earth is the center of the universe. And these people were like, no, via our instruments and via mathematics and physics, we're finding out that the Earth is not the center of the universe, but rather it revolves around the sun. There was even this one guy, Giordano Bruno, who even said, when even further with the speculation that we're not even the center of the universe, totally upending uh, the foundations of Christianity. And this guy Bruno even went so far as speculating that there is no center of no universe at all. That the universe is infinite. It's always expanding. So if it's infinite, it's just infinite space, which is this is kind of what we believe now. If the universe is infinite space, then there is no middle point. Thus, totally, like I said again, upending and criticizing, basically saying that this belief that we are the center of the universe because God made us is bullshit. So this guy Bruno was burned at the stake for going that far. You know what happened to Copernicus, to Galileo, right? They all got house arrest. Right? They were arrested and kind of like what we're doing right now, stay at home, right? Because of their writings, totally going against the foundations, the very foundations of our Christian beliefs, which was had a monopoly in everything at this point. So now we're turning to the modern period. Rene Descartes is totally enmeshed in the scientific revolution. He's part of it. So he's very, very influenced by these happenings. As a matter of fact, he's alive while Bruno is burned at the stake. This guy, Rene Descartes. So to give you some dates here to kind of get you some context, Rene Descartes was born in 1596 and he died in 1650. So I guess I'll give you a little bit of a background about Descartes. He's a French guy. He's French. He was born in Touraine, France. At age 10, very, very young age, his parents sent him to a Jesuit, Le Fletch. I really don't know how to pronounce French, so I'm just making shit up. But the Royal Jesuit College at Le Fletch. It's a really rigorous, syllabus that they have there, the Jesuits. Right? They studied everything from humanities, theology, of course, philosophy, which includes logic, mathematics, metaphysics, science. So he studied all this stuff beginning at the age of 10. And this was like a 9-year course. So he was there for 9 years studying this stuff, beginning at the age of 10. Right? So he was really enmeshed with this, with this traditional, pedagogy. So he comes from those traditionalists, right? He's being taught by Jesuits. Jesuits are an order of the Christian missionaries. So these are Christians. He's being taught by Christians. And by the end of his 90-year study there, he realizes that he first realizes that a lot of these people contradict each other. A lot of these authors that he's studying in this Jesuit college, they often contradict each other, or within their own writings, they contradict themselves. So he left. This is what he says. Let me give you a quote of what he says. This is on his Discourse on Method, one of his famous books. I found myself embarrassed with so many doubts and errors that it seemed to me that the effort to instruct myself had no effect other than the increasing discovery of my own ignorance. And so when he left school, he was like, damn, I left with more questions than with answers. And that was basically what spurs his philosophical method, the method of doubt. I really hope this blank whiteboard starts working today. The method of doubt. That's what he's really famous for, Rene Descartes. The method of doubt. So Rene Descartes he's really enmeshed in this traditional way of studying and understanding the world, and he leaves school with more doubts than with answers, except for mathematics. He knows that in math, there's specific truths in math. It doesn't matter if you're a Roman Greco-pagan, or if you're an Aristotelian, or a Platonist, or an atheist, or whatever you are, you cannot deny that 2 plus 2 equals 4. Or that triangles have 3 sides. Or that if A is bigger than B, and B is bigger than C, then A has to be bigger than C. Right? You cannot deny those facts, those mathematical, logical truths. Right? So he finds some kind of certainty. Right? There's no doubt there. There is certainty that 2 plus 2 equals 4. Doesn't matter where you are, who you are. 2 plus 2 equals 4. It's mathematical logic. And he questions, like, why the fuck don't we have that kind of certainty in this philosophy? So that's pretty much the whole project of Descartes, is bringing certainty to philosophy. Basically just merging mathematics, right, the certainty that mathematics has, with all the crap philosophy brings with it, try to make it more certain. That's what's going on with Descartes. Give you a little bit more background on Descartes. He's a really interesting guy. He was actually a soldier of fortune. He was a mercenary. So by 1616, it's already old. What would it be? In his 20s, 30s, he gets a law degree at Poitiers. And then he becomes a mercenary. And while he's soldiering, that's where he gets his ideas about using doubt and using and about certainty and all this stuff that we're talking about right now in a little moment. He then finally retired in Holland. Holland back then was very liberal. It was very intellectually liberal. Uh, you wouldn't be suppressed. Your writings or your thoughts wouldn't be suppressed, as say in France or in Spain or in England, where you had censorship. Holland had free press and stuff. So he retired in Holland, where for the next 20 years there he wrote and published his ideas. He died in around 1650s. What it was? What's the year he fucking died? 1650, right? He died in 1650. I gotta tell you this really quickly. In 1649, a year before he died, he was called upon by Queen Christina of Sweden. So Queen Christina of Sweden invited Descartes to join this big circle of like intellectuals to go and debate about life and philosophy, science and stuff. So he first resisted. He said like no, he rejected, but then later he was like, you know what, I can't reject it. She's a queen, right? She's a monarch, so I have to go. So he goes, and lo and behold, Queen Christina could only see Descartes at 5 in the morning. This ungodly hour, 5 in the morning. And Descartes, he had inherited. He didn't have to work much. Right? He was pretty well off. So for most of his life, he would sleep for all the way to like 1 p.m. or noon, and that's when he would do his philosophizing. He would just stay in bed for a long time, right? Even after he would wake up, he would just stay in bed and just philosophize and think about everything he come up with. Rigorous new schedule, waking up at 5 in the morning, and then in Sweden, it's really really cold. He eventually put a burden on Descartes, and everybody pretty much agrees that that's what killed him. That this really rigorous schedule, he was not used to waking up at 4 in the morning to be there at 5, and then in the winter time in Sweden, he was not used to that, and he got a really bad cold or pneumonia, and he died. That led to his death. So that's a little bit of background of Rene Descartes. So let's go into his actual, I guess, methods, his actual philosophy. So Rene Descartes gets out of class, right? He gets out of college, from the Jesuit college. He says, you know what? I cannot trust none of these things. So he begins scraping everything that he knows. Right? So he's dealing with the issue of epistemology. Epistemology is the study of knowledge. And there's different kinds of knowledge. Right? There's the episteme, right? Knowing what, right? Knowing what something is. That's one kind of knowledge. Uh, for example, we know what a cold feels like, or influenza feels like, right? The symptoms where everybody's afraid of getting right now, right? But besides knowing what, episteme, we also know how, the technique, right? The how to, right? So we know how to. And I've talked about this in our lectures before, this big break. But what most philosophers, pretty much starting with Descartes now, think about now, it's not the what or the how, but knowing that something is or something is not the case. This is what we call propositional knowledge. And this is basically what all philosophers are primarily worried about. Propositional knowledge. It's based upon a proposition. It is the fact that it's sunny outside, or it is the fact that it's not sunny outside. It is or it's not. So a proposition is it's a statement that is either true or false. It asserts that something is or is not the fact. That is what propositional knowledge is. And this is basically what Descartes is all worried about. How do we know that is the case or not? How do we know that basically I'm not dreaming this right now? I'm not hallucinating this lecture. this whole world? How do I know that I am real? How do I know the really real? And so, right, let's talk about a little bit recap here, right? We talked about different kinds of approaches to knowledge. Some people say that we can know no knowledge, right? The skeptics. Foundationally, we're incapable of knowing that. That is the case or not the case. We don't know. Then we have the empiricists who say that it's our senses, it's our experiences that give us access through this to this propositional knowledge. That give us access to say that I know that. I know that it's sunny outside. I could just look at the window. Right? It's pretty sunny outside. I know that. Right? And it was experience. All of us right now. And then we have the rationalist that says we don't need to experience anything. That looks pretty cool. We don't need to experience anything, right? It's just, I just know 2 plus 2 equals 4. I just know that if A is bigger than B and B is bigger than C, then A has to be bigger than C. I just know that without seeing it, without experiencing it, or having the whole screen just red. That's rationalism. Right? There's different approaches to it. And what's really cool about Descartes is that he goes kind of through each one to kind of find his point of certainty. So right, he go again. He wants to find something of certainty, just like in math, to apply it to propositional knowledge, to apply it to philosophy, basically. So what is knowledge thus far? Remember Plato now? Knowledge is justified true belief. It's going to be true. It's going to be justified. You got to have your reasons. And you got to believe in it, first of all. Right? Justified true beliefs. But how do we get those? How do we know what's true? How do we, what's the yardstick? What's the test? Right? What's the acid test? Basically, this is what Rene uses, Descartes, right? This acid test of what is true to be justified in our beliefs, basically. So this is epistemology again. Right? What is the truth? So philosophers, including Descartes, distinguish between two kinds of ways to acquire knowledge, right? Keeping in mind these different approaches between the skeptics, the empiricist, and the rationalist. There's two ways to acquire knowledge. One is through reason, and one is through sense experience, corresponding with rationalists and with empiricists. The one the rationalists take, the way to acquire knowledge, is called a priori knowledge. A priori. Prior, right? We have that word prior. We know what prior means. It's before something. Before what? Experience. It's a prior to experience. This knowledge is prior to experience. Pretty much it's innate. We already have it in us. We don't have to experience whatever it is to know what that is. It's a priori knowledge. Is knowledge gained independently of or prior to sense experience. The other type of knowledge way to acquire knowledge is posteriori. Posteriori. Post means after. Too bad we don't have any freaking sports anymore, but there'll be like a post-game show, right? A post-game whatever awards. After the game, there's a little show that recaps the whole game. The post. Right? So post means after. After what? After experience. This is what empiricists talk about. We have to experience things first in order to gain knowledge from it. Right, so two different ways to acquire knowledge. A priori and a posteriori knowledge. So let's talk about, so there's Descartes now. Let's go back to Descartes. And he's the one that has the most influential of the rationalist theories of how we acquire knowledge. Right, and it's a knowledge based on a firm foundation to which the rest of the edifice is unshakable. Right? So he finds out that he agrees with the skeptics. Sense experience, it could deceive us. Right? Not all the time. Not all our senses are always right. And beyond that, how do we test that my senses are correct? We can use for example, I can use my sense of taste to test if my sense of seeing is correct. Right? We can't use different senses to test their soundness, their truthfulness. And so we're kind of stuck here, right? Well, how do we know for sure? So he does agree with the skeptics there that sense experience is not a certain root. You could find some things, you could know some things about material, I guess, or material reality, just like the superficial stuff here right in front of me, but it's not certain. Our senses are not certain. So what do we do? What does Rene does? So he pretty much begins. He begins as the most skeptic of all. He begins by doubting everything. The analogy I like to give for my classes is this. Right? Think about you have a bucket of apples. Right? This is all your knowledge stuff. You have all your knowledge in these. Each apple is knowledge. And then you go to college and you realize that one of those apples is rotten. That the knowledge is wrong. That Ansem is wrong, for example. Ansem is one of the apples in your baskets. So Ansem is wrong. So then you realize, wow, if that's wrong, if one apple is rotten, how do I know that not the other apples are rotten as well? So what's the best way to find out if the other apples are not rotten? Is to dump all of them out and to investigate each one and look at each apple. Okay, this one's good. I'll keep this one. Oh no, this one's kind of rotten. I'm gonna have to throw this away. And that's basically what Descartes does with knowledge, right? He questions every single thing he has. And again, he has all the time in the world pretty much. He stays in bed till like 1 p.m. or so, just thinking about this stuff. Right? So this is his method of doubt. So instead of like fighting doubt, instead of like arguing against the skeptics, he uses it as a tool to find certainty. Right? He uses his doubt as one of his methods to justify rationalism. So first he wants to find knowledge that he could, quote unquote, he says, clearly and evidently intuit or deduce with certainty. And it's all about certainty for him. We're going to find a starting point that is certain for sure. We cannot trust in our senses, and he doesn't want to take the skeptical view. Right? He's developing the rationalist view here. So he has to find a starting point that has 0% doubt. So what he does, he subjects all his knowledge to what he calls an acid test. When I just kind of the analogy I just gave you. So all the knowledge he has, he kind of pours acid on it, right? To make sure. So acid here is like to uncover stuff, right? And whatever is left over, that's the actual knowledge he has. So that's what he does. So he doubts everything, and he goes on. It's really cool. Let me go back to this textbook over here. So first he starts saying that, you know what, it took me a long while to get here. I had to be mature enough to begin doubting this stuff. Right? So for him, philosophy takes time. Right? This is what he says: I have delivered my mind from every care, and I am happily agitated by no passions. And since I have procured for myself in assured leisure, in a peaceable retirement, I shall at least seriously and freely address myself to the general upheaval of all my former opinions. And so he has all the time in the world. He's retired. He goes off to the woods to be alone, to just be in his own thoughts. And he first comes up with his. He first says this. He notes that, how can I know for sure that I'm dreaming or I'm awake? How do I know that that reality is not a dream. And think about this: a dream is real. It's a fact that you have dreams. Dreams are real. It's just not doesn't correspond to this external world we have right now, right? But dreams are a real thing. And so how do I know that right now it's not a real thing right now, as in a dream? Right? This is what he says. There are no certain indications by which we may clearly distinguish wakefulness from sleep. Our dreams can seem like reality, right? Having these vivid dreams, right? They can seem like reality. And in dreams, we often don't know that we are dreaming until we wake up. It's like, oh wow, it was a dream. Right? Or when you remember a dream, it's like, was it a dream or was that really happening? Maybe that sometimes happens to you, though. So, more to the point, Descartes' point is this: it is possible that our sense experience, the only thing we have to determine if we are in reality or not, is just by experiencing it, our sense experience. But right, this tool of sense experience, by which we presume to know material reality. How do we know that sense experience itself, this whole experience, is just not the dream? There is really no way to find that out, to cut across that. It says Descartes here. For senses are deceptive. Our senses can deceive us, and often does. And then the other argument he has about throwing away empiricism is the evil genius argument. How do we not know that some evil genius is putting these experiences to me? That right now it's 11:46 a.m. right now, April 3rd. It's sunny. It's actually pretty nice weather. I wish I could go outside. Right? How do I know that all these experiences, all these senses that I'm having, all this sense data that I'm being bombarded right now, is not being put by some evil genius, by some big entity, supreme entity? Right? This is exactly what the premise of this Matrix, the movie from the 90s, right? Neo, right? He kind of, everybody says, right, the Matrix is like everybody's in a dream, and there's like these aliens or some shit like that kind of like have everybody's connected to some kind of simulation game or reality. So everything is a simulation, and then you take the red pill or the blue pill. I forgot what pill he takes, and you break away from that simulation. Right? That's the same premise that here Descartes is dealing with. How do we not know that this is all a simulation, a simulacra? How do we know that this is really real? They're really real. Right? This is what Plato was also preoccupied about. Right? He's saying that we live in a world of shadows here. And then the forms, the ideas, that's the really real. And that's the whole purpose of how do we get there, right? It's the reason. Same thing with Descartes, just in a whole updated version of Plato's rationalism. So how do I know that this evil genius or this evil god has systematically deceived me? So he's just all in doubt. He's pretty skeptical over everything right now. And at this point, he sees like no way out. According to the meditations, he takes a couple of days off, and he comes back to this problem. He's like, you know what? This has haunted me. This problem where am I real or am I not? Am I just gonna like, what is real? He's like, you know what? Aha, the fuck? Me thinking right now, me doubting everything, me saying this proposition that what if everything is not real? My mind coming up with this idea about doubting everything, that's real. That's for sure real. I could be certain that I am thinking this stuff. As crazy as it is, right? About doubting everything, about doubting absolutely everything. That in itself is a real thing. My mind thinking is a real thing. I might not have a body. I might be a simulation. Everything might be simulation. I might be deceived. I might be in a dream. The evil genius might be deceiving me all the time. But that doesn't matter because I'm still able to think that I am being deceived, that I'm doubting, that I'm all that. I'm able to think. I am a res cogitans. This is the res cogitans. And put an S at the bottom. Try to spell it better. RES, like cognition, cogitans. Oh man. Res cogitans. The thinking thing. The mind. I have that. Right? I think, therefore I am. Cogito ergo sum. Cogito means I think, ergo, therefore, sum. I am. Cogito ergo sum. That I could be fucking certain for sure. That I am a thinking thing. Might not be a body. Might not be my body. Might not be a brain itself. For example, a brain is a physical material thing. But I have a mind. This res cogitans. The res extensia, that's the body. That's different from the mind. Res extens. That's the extension of the mind, which could be a body or it could be something else. Right? Depending on what our reality is, I guess, or what simulation we're in. Right? So we have this thinking thing, the I, that exists. Let me see if I should read this from the. This is what straight from the horse's mouth. This is what Descartes says here. Then, let me start before that. But I was persuaded then that there was nothing on the world, that there was no heaven, no earth, that there was no minds, nor any bodies. Was I not like then likewise persuaded that I did not exist? Not at all. Of a surety, I myself did exist, since I persuaded myself of something, or merely because I thought of something. Then without doubt I exist. Also, if this evil genius deceives me, and let him deceive me as much as he will, he can never cause me to be nothing so long as I think that I am something. So this evil genius, he can never cause me to be nothing so long as I think that I am something. So that after having reflected well and carefully examined all things, we must come to the definite conclusion that this proposition, I am, I exist, is necessarily true each time that I pronounce it, or that I mentally conceive it. Cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. That I can be certain of. Everything else is doubtful, but I could be for sure. I could say that I am a thing, that I exist somehow by the mere fact that I'm thinking. Right? This is how Descartes goes from being a pure skeptic to finding certainty, and this is his foundation of the rest of his edifice, of his intellectual edifice. I think, therefore I am. And then the next kind of part is kind of a little bit, kind of goes fuzzy. It kind of goes back, kind of goes backwards here. All right, let's see. I like this other book a little bit better. Okay, then he goes on to kind of off in the tangent to justify the existence of God based upon this res cogitans, about this I that is able to think himself into existence, basically. that behind this I, this cogitans, this thinking thing, behind this I is the idea of a perfect God. He argues that nothing less than this perfect God could have caused the idea of God. Right? So nothing less. Right? So this kind of, it's just he's kind of resounding what Anselm is saying. Right? He's using an ontological argument for the existence of God. Right? God must have given me this ability to think, and nothing less than this perfect, supreme God must exist then. Again, this is where he fails a lot of people. This is what we call the Cartesian Struggle. He's basically just begging the question here. He's going around in the circle. That because God is a perfect being, he gave us this idea of being because God is perfect in all being, therefore he exists, basically. So this Cartesian circle. And he rests this Cartesian circle, this ontological argument for the existence of God based upon our ability to think ourselves into existence. The thinking thing. Behind this thinking thing has to be a God. That's Descartes. And then he goes on to say that this God behind this thinking thing has to be perfect. And if he's perfect, he cannot possibly deceive me. Because if a perfect God deceives us, then he's not perfect. He's imperfect because he's a deceiver. But he says that a perfect God cannot be a deceiver. So thus, this is not a simulation by an evil genius. All right. And then he goes on with another argument for rationalism. And this will be the last part of this lecture. Because I really don't want to go on with about this thing about God. You can read it on your own here. But what he's talking about is this intuition of the mind. This is a thinking thing. This is the res cogitans in action. The intuition of the mind. This perfect God that is unable to deceive us because he's perfect gave us this tool, this intuition of the mind. So he gives us this analogy, Descartes, in his meditations here. He says, think about a piece of wax, like a candle, like a piece of wax, right? You have your sense experience when you get a piece of wax, and he says, I just got this fresh from the farmer's market. You can still, smell the flowers from the pollen that made it, from the bees or whatever. You can still, it's beeswax. You can still feel the flowers. You can still smell the earth and stuff. You can have all this sense experience of this piece of wax. But then I put it to a fire, all that sense experience melts away, literally. Right? You cannot smell really the flowers no more. It smells different. He says that when you have when it's hard, the wax, the beeswax, you hit it on something, it makes a little sound. But when it's melted, it doesn't make a sound no more. So is it a whole different new thing? Is it a whole different new object? He says, no, our minds know better. Right? This intuition of the mind knows better. That is still wax. It's just melted, right? But we still know it's wax. We won't call it something else, right? We won't say it's a whole different thing because our sense experience says it's a whole different thing, right? So here he's attacking empiricism that is based upon sense experience or senses, right? In empiricism, I'm saying that the only way to gain knowledge, to acquire knowledge, is through experience it through our senses. And he's saying, look at this, right? He was saying we have there's wax. It changes, but it's still the same. How do we make sense of that? Right? For empiricists, they'd have to make a new. It will be a whole new thing. The wax being melted. For rationalists, they're like, no, we know that that's wax still. So it's a whole different experience when it's melted than when it's in solid state, but it's still we know that it's wax. Right? Or with a piece of clay. I think I brought that up in our lectures before. You have a piece of clay, and you can make it into little figurines or into anything, right? It could be a little horse, it could be a little man, it could be whatever you wanted to make, but it's still clay. Right? So that's right. It's the intuition of the mind here. And this intuition of the mind rests on this idea, right? This rationalist, they believe strongly in the doctrine of innate ideas. And some ideas we are born with, right? And again, this is Plato. So Plato is given the title of being like the great grandfather of rationalism. Right? He's the one that really came out with this first, and then Descartes refined it to a more perfect level. Yeah, we have these innate ideas. It's más, the concept of perfection. Has anybody ever experienced perfection? But yet we're able to understand it, to conceptualize it, and to talk about it, to talk about perfection. But we never experienced it. Yet we understand it. We have knowledge of it. So how would an empiricist account for that? They won't be able to, because in empiricist it's all about sense experience. You got to experience perfection to know it. But yet we still are able to discuss it and to understand it, says the rationalist. Right? So there's these innate ideas. Right? For example, perfection is one of them that are a priori, that are prior to experience, right? And they're innate. We're born with them, right? Think about Meno and the slave kid and the geometry problem about Plato. The same kind of concept here. They're innate. The idea of, say, God or freedom or justice, right? Right? We never really experience God, but yet we're able to kind of understand what it is, or what that is, or justice, right? Or freedom in its pure sense. Right? Have we ever really experienced freedom in its own sense, like purely? But we know what it is, right? So there's all these ideas that are, you don't experience them, but we have knowledge of them. How do we account for that? And rationalists say it's innate. We're just born with these ideas, right? This is what Plato would say. They're like the forms. We just have to discover them. They're out there. We just have to discover them. So, for example, if I say that Santa Fe, New Mexico, is about 150 miles north of El Paso, I don't have to experience it. I don't have to drive 150 miles north to know that Santa Fe is 150 miles north of El Paso, right? Even if there was no humans right around, no minds or no bodies to experience that, Santa Fe, right, that spot over there, those mountains over there, I don't know what mountains there are over there, I forgot. Sandia Peak, right? That still will be 150 miles from Franklin Mountains. Right? That doesn't change. Right? Those are some, and these are what the rationalists are saying. There's some external, right, objective truths out there that are independent from our own. It's not about experience. They're out there. We have to discover them, right? Like mathematical truths and stuff like that. All right, there's innate ideas, right? You just have to discover them. A good example of innate ideas that is in the modern world now, in our contemporary age, is this guy called Noam Chomsky. He's a linguist, but recently he's been really active, politically active, against neoliberalism and capitalism. But he's a linguist, and he has this really cool theory called the language acquisition device. Language acquisition device. And this language acquisition device, what he's saying is that every human being from birth has this LED, this device, just innately in our brains that help us acquire languages as when we're babies and young. So I don't know if you notice, but most babies, most kids, the way they acquire, the way they learn language is by mimicking. They pick it up really, really fucking quick. It's pretty amazing how quickly a kid could learn a language. So the best time to learn new languages is before you're 13, because that language acquisition device is just very, very keen. And And that's for everybody, right? There's like this, particularly what Chomsky talks about, it's about syntax. There's like this universal syntax. And syntax just means grammar. It's a fancy word for grammar. Syntax. And this is what this language acquisition device kind of helps us understand the rules of grammar. Right? Grammar is kind of hard to understand once you're past 13, right? To learn all those rules. But when you're a kid, you pick up grammar rules just by mimic, just by hearing them. And that's what Chomsky talks about. That's just innate. It's just within us as we're born. Right? We don't have to experience that. We just got this device in us that helps us learn languages. And then he goes on to argue that this is what makes us unique from other non-human animals. This is Descartes, all right? So I'm pretty much going to end it with that, with Chomsky, I guess. So Descartes is all about rationalism. All we need is just the res cogitans, the thinking mind, to be certain about knowledge. Right? We don't need our sense experiences at all. Right? So this is kind of alludes to kind of like Avicenna's idea or argument for the soul. Right? The flying man. He doesn't need, right? He knows he's there. He exists. He doesn't need a body to know he exists. He doesn't need to experience his body. But he knows he exists. Cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. Alright, cool. So that's the end of the lecture, guys. Hope you guys are staying safe and healthy. And we'll see you soon, virtually. Peace out, guys.